This is the Average to Savage podcast with Paul Guarino. Everyone and anyone, athletes, celebs, and much more.
What's up, everybody? I'm back for another episode of the Average Savage podcast. Our special guest today is Alex Tuccio, founder of ScoutDay. Alex, how's it going?
Good, Paul. Thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on.
For sure. Thanks a lot.
Now, let's just jump right into it. Could you give us a brief background about yourself before I ask you some follow-up questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I guess my life, you can look at it in two ways. I'm an athlete turned entrepreneur. In terms of my athletic career, I played baseball my entire life up until about 3 years ago when I entered the business world. You know, baseball was my entire life. I did the whole, travel ball, took it very seriously coming up, went to boarding school, prep school, all in the hopes of getting a scholarship. So that's really where I formed my identity kind of in my childhood and my early days, my high school days, was on the baseball field. Was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to play D1 baseball. I ended up committing to Seton Hall University out of high school. And then from Seton Hall, I ended up transferring to Siena College, which is a D1 program up in Albany, New York. And that's basically where I spent 3.5 years of my college career. So I would, consider that to be a big chunk of where I spent my time. And while I was at Siena, I had the idea for my current company, ScoutDay, looking at kind of my troubles and experiences going through the recruiting and the scouting process, despite everything I did do to put myself in a position to be successful. So at Siena is where I had the idea for ScoutDay, was going to continue playing and pursue master's in business at Rollins College following my graduation from Siena. Decided kind of on a gut feeling to forego that and commit to my business full time, literally right out of Siena. So the story goes, we made it to the MAC championship game my senior year. We got blown out on championship Sunday by, I think it was Fairfield or Marist. I don't even remember who it was, but we got our ass kicked. And I don't even remember the score. I'm pretty sure we're down by like 15 runs. We ran out of pitching, but it was me at the plate for the last out. Struck out on 4 pitches. I was pinch hitting in that game, and that was my last at bat. And 24 hours later, after crying at the plate and crying after the game, I was in Boston, where I live now, still to this day, and made the move right away. And ever since then, I've just been heads down in the business life, just making connections and building my business. So it's been a lot of fun, but that's kind of my background. Like I said, it's kind of 2 buckets for me. Both of the phases of my life are pretty tied together in that way. So that's how we got here today.
Yeah, definitely. A wild way to end it right there.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. I wish I had a more epic story, but you know what? Maybe it is a good story. It's all about kind of the failures of my baseball career, and what I could have been is, what drives me forward. And, I have my own podcast as well, and I was just talking about this week, actually, in Laguna Beach with Ed Milet. Ed's, huge entrepreneur, has a massive podcast as well, also a baseball player. And we talked about the same regret. I mean, this guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not. I'm in the process of, building my life resume and my own success. But this guy has it all. And it's those moments of failure that really drive us to much bigger things. So while it's not an epic story, like I had a game-winning hit or something, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Maybe it's that defining moment that will define the rest of my life. So, I'm grateful for the way that it ended, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe that led to ScoutDay.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I always ask athletes like what the recruiting process was like coming out of high school. So I know that was definitely big for you. So, and I didn't even know actually until now you went to Seton Hall. So what was the recruiting process like, and like maybe your likes and dislikes?
Yeah, it was really tough. I mean, if any athlete says they like the recruiting process, they're either crazy or one of the top players in the country, because that's really the only way to make it easy on yourself and your family, is if you're either just insane and you love stress and chaos, or if you're just that good where you have the schools knocking on your door, and those players do exist across multiple sports. I wasn't one of those players. I personally did not enjoy the recruiting process. It takes a lot of work. It's a huge financial commitment. It's a huge time commitment. I can only speak to kind of the baseball recruiting process because that's where I have my experience. But, going around to all these events, all over the country just to get in front of these coaches, it's a huge commitment not only for the athlete, but for the families and the parents especially as well. They're the ones paying for it, in the hopes of seeing a return in some sort of opportunity or scholarship or something like that. So it's definitely a tough process. It's complicated. And where it all changed for me was I was getting recruited, 2011, 2012, which is crazy. That's 7 years ago. But, at the time, I really wasn't gathering much attention, despite being, one of the top high school players in New England. I was all New England twice in high school, my sophomore, junior year. And yet, here I was, my senior year, uncommitted, no real offers that I liked. And where it all changed for me was basically I went to the cages one day with a teammate of mine, Pat Mazika. He now plays for the Mets, and he's Tim Tebow's roommate and all this stuff. And Pat and I went down the cages, and I was like, I'm going to make a hitting video of my swing, and I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'm going to send it to these coaches. And it sounds so obvious now, but like in 2011, 2012, like YouTube wasn't really that popular. Like the idea of sending a video was not something that was common. And so I just had this gut intuition that led me to do that. And so it was that video, and it's still on YouTube today. It's funny to watch now, but it was that video that, got me in the door at Seton Hall. And even funnier is when I decided I was going to leave Seton Hall and transfer, all I did was make another video, and that's what got me to Siena. So tying it all together to what I'm doing now in business, like I've had this own personal experience where I saw firsthand like the power of technology and the power of video. And that's what ScoutDay is it's all about, digitizing the recruiting process in a mobile and, in a content and a data-driven way. And so it's all based off of my own experience that I've seen firsthand over the last, I guess, 5 to 7 years now. Technology has shifted. Everyone has an iPhone now. Like, it wasn't always that way. Like, it's still relatively new. So just to tie together what my recruiting process was like and the direction that everything's going, like, ScoutDay is kind of falls into the middle of that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about the YouTube video because I had Daniel Rodriguez on. He went to Clemson, and he was in the Army before, like, going back to football. And that's exactly what he did. And that was, like, even earlier. I think it was maybe 2009, 2010. He made the video, and then Dabo Sweeney saw it. And they got him on the team, stuff like that. And then,
man, it's crazy.
So
it's
crazy.
Video. It's crazy for us guys, mid-20s now. I think the younger generation, like high school kids now, for example, like they've really, really grown up with technology. Like they've always had the iPad or a phone in their hands. Like for our generation, like we're in an interesting spot because we had technology in our hands. Yeah. But we grew up through, like, my first cell phone, for example, was like the LG Envy, the phone that was like horizontal. You flip it open, and then you have the keyboard. Like, it was the coolest thing ever, the bright orange Envy phone. And so it's not like we didn't have technology, but what we lived through, and especially in the sports side, and like hearing Danny's story you just said, and kind of my story, and thousands of other athletes, is like we've lived through the transformation of this technology, which I think is a really interesting time frame to live through, where we remember the Nintendo 64 days and like the GameCube days and like where it is now with esports. It's fascinating. You know what I mean? Technology is fascinating. So I enjoy being a part of it. Obviously there's a lot of negative sides with social media and stuff like that, but what I try to do is develop solutions and communities that have a positive impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember, I think it was freshman year of, high school, I was still using, a floppy disk to, save stuff.
Yeah,
how wild is that?
USB ports or whatever.
Yeah, how wild is that? It was, 10 years? That's, it's not that many years,
Yeah, man.
But, yeah, back to your baseball career and stuff. Overall, what was your experience like at Siena?
Honestly, it's quite poor. I feel comfortable now talking about it. And if you follow me on Instagram, I've written a little bit about it. And, I've shared my experience through the ScoutDay account as well. But, honestly, it wasn't great. My advice to players is to take more accountability. And that's something that I wish I did. A year or 2 years out of Siena, all I can look back and say, the coaching staff did this to me. The coaches didn't like me. I didn't play. But looking back, what I tell players now is maybe we just need to look, in the mirror as athletes and as people. And when things aren't going our way, just take accountability and just be like, look, maybe we're not good enough. Maybe our talent isn't as good as we think it is, and we're just not deserving of the opportunity that we're fighting for and, shedding blame for. And so I was just one of those players. And I think there's, thousands, if not millions of athletes across all sports, who struggle with the idea of, politics or, coaches not liking them, whatever it might be. Like, there's a lot of excuses and stories that we tell ourselves as athletes if things aren't going well. If things are going great, obviously it's easy to just keep it rolling and, you're in the lineup every day and stuff. But I wasn't one of those players, and that was hard for me. Coming out of high school, being a key part of, one of the top 25 high school programs in the country, transitioning to basically a role player at Siena. I felt like my abilities were better than I was, given an opportunity to show. But what I should have done differently is I should have, stepped up my game to meet the challenge and really earn the opportunity. I think I struggled with a sense of entitlement and stuff like that. And, the narrative has shifted for me. The narrative I tell myself has shifted from looking at that experience to where I am today in business. And I look at everything I've been through as just one big lesson, where maybe my baseball career was simply in my life, for 21 years to set the foundation for my career in business. Like, I really feel like business is what I was born to do. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, I believe in things like the fact that it's in my blood. Like, I believe in like the DNA aspect and things like that. And so that's what I look at, my career at Siena, and just like the overall, when I look back on my career is, there were a lot of challenges, a lot of things that I went through. And it's those challenges that hold me accountable now as a businessman and an entrepreneur. And so that's how I look back at it, is like, maybe it was just, especially the sport of baseball being a game of failure and everything, baseball players go through. That's kind of how I look at it now, is just setting the foundation. And there's definitely adversity that I went through throughout my career, especially towards the end, that, created a sense of an accountability that I didn't have before. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I saw the other day, it was a meme or just like a status or something, and it was like, don't go for the school for like the bumper sticker, go pick it based on if you're going to play or not, something like that.
I'm a huge fan of that. That's actually one of the things that I've, put out there myself.
That's what I was going to say. I think I saw it on, you might have posted it maybe.
Yeah, I have posted that. It's funny because that's kind of what I did, you know what I mean? And that's why I post it, is it's something I know the feeling that these athletes have and the parents have of, you see cars driving around, especially in suburban areas, the big SUVs. Like, I know you're a Connecticut guy. Like, you drive around Fairfield County, and it's all about, what bumper sticker you have on your Chevy Suburban or your Range Rover. You know what I mean? Like, that's the area that I grew up in, and looking at what these parents want out of their kids and the pressure these kids are under. You shouldn't be doing it for what's on the back of the car. You should be doing it for, the stories that you're going to be able to tell, 10, 20, 50 years down the road about your experience. You got to think about that stuff. And it's hard to wrap our heads around something like that with a decision as big as, you can only really go to college once for the most part. Yeah. So, unless you transfer something like I did, it's a big decision. So.
Yeah, especially for an athlete, then your clock is ticking too with the play 4 years over 5 years or whatever it is.
Exactly. Like Yep, 100%.
So all this, I'm assuming, happened for a reason, and then that's how pretty much you figured out the way to create the ScoutDay app. So, like, how did you think about it at the beginning, and like, what was the development process like?
So how did I think about it at the beginning? To me, it felt like a no-brainer. Like, just thinking about the logical way that the recruiting process works, it's very much like social media. It's all about how much attention you can gather. And so to me, the idea of having a digital platform that's basically a community that has a critical mass of players and a critical mass of coaches existing in a mobile native environment just made total sense. It's how, the showcases in the baseball industry that charge, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a weekend of games and workouts just to get that coach's attention. Like, it's the same business model, just in a different medium. And our advantage as being a tech platform is a few things. One, it's the cost. Like, we don't need to charge $100 or $500 or $1,000. It can be very inexpensive for the players. It can be free for the coaches. And then we also don't have to deal with things like, we need to rent a field, or we need to deal with the weather, or we need to, schedule a time where all the coaches are available to come to a showcase event. So there's just a lot of flexibility and advantages to being a tech platform. So that's how I thought of it, was I just kind of reverse engineered the logic of the recruiting process, and like, how can I apply what's worked and proven in other business models in a tech and native mobile environment. So that's really how I thought about it. In terms of the actual development, that's probably the hardest part. Our strong suit at ScoutDay and kind of my strong suit as an entrepreneur is definitely on the digital side, the branding side. We have 106,000 followers now on Instagram, and that's really what's kept us alive. We've encountered a lot of challenges with the app development itself. And, for people who listen to this who have an app idea, which there's a lot of people who have app ideas, it's easier said than done. I'm happy to provide, kind of my Instagram if anyone ever listens to this and wants to reach out and needs advice in terms of, going after an app idea and actually executing it. Happy to, provide my info so people have someone in their corner to get some advice. Because for me, I was just grinding, man. Like, I just wanted to make it work. And it was almost my drive and desire to make it work, where I definitely skipped a few steps in terms of due diligence throughout the app process. And that's where I've made a lot of my mistakes, to be honest with you, in business, is, working with the wrong people or the wrong groups on the app side. And it burns you because it's not something you understand if you don't know how to code.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a tough process, but I'm happy to hopefully use this podcast as an avenue to reach one or two or several people who have app ideas who need the help.
Yeah, for sure. I think probably creating an app is probably one of the most hardest things in the technology world right now.
And it definitely has huge upside, and I think that's why people like it. And I think it's also, we use our phones every day for hours and hours. So like apps are something that are easily understood now, but it's definitely what you don't appreciate as just a casual user of these platforms like Instagram and stuff is like what goes into it to make them work the way that they do. It's really not that easy, and that's something that I didn't really account for getting into the business, but it's something now 2.5 years later that I definitely do understand. So
yeah, for sure. Could you give me like a brief summary on it, like explaining like how the ScoutDay app works?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically it's a video-based app. We have 15,000 players so far who have signed up for the app, 650 colleges. And basically, as a player, if you're a player listening to this or a parent of a player, you sign up with your email. It's really easy. Create a username, password, put in all your basic information, your position, graduation year, all that stuff. You submit your video, and that's pretty much it. Like, the sign-up process is very simple. It's a very simple app right now. We're working on releasing a second version that will expand it a little bit, but basically, like I explained earlier, it's all about showcasing your video footage in the same way you would showcase your talent, if you were on a physical baseball field. So basically using the app, once you create that profile, you can express interest to the schools directly through the app, using the interface. And then the college coaches on their end can flip through. They can search for players based on specific criteria. And then, they can also express their interest. And if the interest is mutual, very similar to the Tinder and Bumble model, then a conversation. Dude, it's funny, and I regret that. Like, that's what I have to compare it to. Yeah. But if you think about the logic of the recruiting process, it all goes back to the core thesis of how can I build a platform that makes sense? Yeah. Like, think about recruiting. If I'm a player, I'm not going to go to a school or have a conversation with a coach if the school's not interested in me. Yeah. And as a college coach, I'm not going to be able to recruit a player if they don't know what my school is, who I am, or if they're interested at all. So, like, as a recruiting platform, why should we allow any other conversation to happen where there's not mutual interest? And it's very similar to dating. And, like, obviously it's an entirely different market. Yeah, but, like, the core premise of, like, how I came up with the idea was, like, literally it came to me in, like, one day. And a friend of mine, Wayne Mazzoni, you probably know Wayne. He's a coach at Sacred Heart. Yes. I texted him, and I was like, dude, what do you think? I didn't say dude. He's a D1 baseball coach. But I was like, here's my idea. Here's my vision. And he was like, I love it. And from there, I was like, all right, Wayne knows a lot of recruiting stuff. He signed off on it. Must be a good idea. And that's how we ultimately pushed into development. And that's what took us so long was basically, not to rant too long, but basically we were developing another app. It was like super, super built out. And I was like, I hate this. Like, I don't know if I can curse on the show, but like, I was like, I fucking hate like what I designed. Like, and anyway, I trashed that because I was uneasy about pushing into development, but like I had gone so far getting the app designed and stuff. I was like, I have no choice but to design this now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then the idea, I remember where I was sitting when I texted Wayne about this. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was like, what do you think of this? And so we just trashed what we worked on for like 4 or 5 months, like I probably wasted I wouldn't say wasted, but basically the first 6 to 8 months of my business. Like we built a website, that no longer exists. We designed an app that we never even pushed into development. So there's just a lot of lessons learned, basically, I guess is the way to look at it. In the early days of starting a business, you just have to push through those challenges and, bring to market a product that makes sense. And, surround yourself with people like I did, who know the space extremely well that you're in, like someone like Wayne Mazzoni, who's written books and things like that, and recruiting, and, I have 3 MLB players who invested in my business. So it's, it's all about your network as well. That's also key.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like baseball, I think business is just like a game of failures.
100%.
And I just saw you went to Dominican Republic recently, so tell me about that experience because it looked like really dope.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, ScoutDay, we've developed an amazing community. I can't say I didn't think this would ever happen because I did. I knew what I could do and I knew what I had in mind when I wanted to build this community. I knew that there was big potential, but to actually have now, 106,000 people organically following us on Instagram is a huge opportunity I'm extremely grateful for, but it also comes with a responsibility. And so basically, in terms of the Dominican Republic, I looked at what we built from our community and I was like, if you look at our content, it's a lot of showcasing player videos and stuff like that. And, when the new year hit this year with 2019, I was like, I want to expand on this. Like, we clearly have something here with our audience. Like, how do we leverage this for the good of the game? And so what popped in my mind was I was like, well, there's all these young athletes around the world, and we always hear the amazing, 30 for 30 stories and E60 stories when they make it to the big leagues. Yeah. Like, who's on the ground communicating with these 14, 16, 18-year-old athletes when they're young and going through the challenges of being a teenager and all the transformation? Like, who's telling those stories? And so that's the decision that I made 6 weeks ago around the new year, just rethinking kind of the business. Like, I want to tell the stories that matter in the game. And Manuel, who's a 14-year-old prospect down there, he's a phenom. He's an amazing shortstop. I have no doubt he's going to sign, probably 16 years old when he's allowed to, with a big league team. But anyway, I had met him in Jupiter for a tournament in October, and he was just a really well-spoken kid. Like, he doesn't necessarily speak English well, but just very well put together. Yeah. He puts out a lot of content on his social media, and I see the fields that he's practicing on and stuff, and I see, like, just the resources he has at his disposal are so much different and honestly less than what the American kids have here in the States. And so I wanted to tell our first story in kind of an original content, branded content way, down in the Dominican, boots on the ground, showing not just the American kids, but we have followers from all over the world. Mm-hmm. What are these prospects in the Dominican, the youth prospects, like, look what they have to work with and compare it to what you have, and then rethink kind of those excuses that you want to tell me about, whatever's going on. So that's really what that was all about. But yeah, we, I'm fortunate to have 2 content people who I work with now who are really, really good, really experienced, and we're looking forward to telling more what I call stories that matter, in the game through our platform.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a great idea, especially like you were just saying, just to see what they don't have and what we have here, and they make a lot more out of less.
Right, 100%.
And now I know you also have a podcast too, The Players Impact. So what was the idea behind that?
Yeah, so just briefly, The Players Impact is a private group of pro athletes based here in Boston. It's 130 or so pro athletes across several sports. All of them are either running their own companies or are actively investing in companies, or a little bit of both. And so I got connected with Tracy, who runs The Players Impact, living here in Boston, offered her my assistance. I felt like I had a skill set on the growth side and kind of the marketing and branding side that could help them. And so just a tip for people listening to this, if you want something, an opportunity that feels synergistic with a bigger goal that you have, offer to do it for free. I know Gary Vee is someone who talks about that, and that's actually what I did. I was like, look, I'll grind for you, Tracy. Like, I believe in the idea and the vision of the group. And so that's how I got involved. If you want more information on it, it's theplayersimpact.com is the website. And so one of the ideas that I brought to Tracy was, I was like, look, we have all these amazing people involved. I think if we create a podcast platform, it could be really good for these athletes and other sports business leaders to, showcase their stories and tell their stories of sports, kind of like what we're doing today, where it's like tie together the journey of being a pro athlete and all that goes into it, and tie it together to business and what these people are doing now currently. And so that was my pitch to her. We started the podcast maybe 6 weeks ago was the first episode, and it's been an amazing transformation in a very short period of time. You know, I've gone from interviewing some amazing people, but mainly through the TPI group, to now, you know, I've had Steve Weatherford, who's a Super Bowl champion, you know, now fitness influencer, amazing guy. I've had him on the episode. Like I mentioned earlier, I just did Ed Milet out in Laguna Beach at his home, which was an amazing experience. He has the fastest growing business podcast in the world himself, and he's one of the wealthiest people in the world, so that was really cool. And we have a lot of more exciting guests that I can't really talk about now, but, you know, definitely working on securing even more people. We're not going to stop now, all because, you know, we're getting a lot of good guests. But, you know, all these people, like I said, the focus of the podcast is it's a sports business podcast. And by definition, it's quite literally a sports and business podcast because we cover both. You know, I, as the host, try to tie together these stories for the audience and, you know, in a way that makes sense. And so it's definitely a really exciting opportunity. And as you know, one of the benefits of hosting your own podcast is getting to meet and talk to, you know, a lot of amazing people directly. That's one of the benefits selfishly as the host. And so that's part of why I went to Tracy and said, I want to be the guy to do it. You know, I saw the vision for it. Personally, I'm an introverted person. I don't know if it's easy to tell, but like public speaking, all that stuff is not something I have a ton of experience with. I'm still learning how to host and ask questions that make sense and flow an interview in the way that makes sense. And, you know, right now we're just bootstrapping it, you know, like even with Ed Milet, someone who has his own crew and, you know, millions of views and downloads on his podcast. Like I showed up with an iPhone tripod and 2 mics I bought on Amazon that were $20 each. And we sat with the Pacific Ocean in the background and we recorded the podcast. Like no fancy equipment or mics or anything like that. We're grinding. So it's a lot of fun and a cool opportunity.
Yeah, I literally just posted an Instagram story right before this to show people that you don't need fancy equipment to start a podcast.
Right. And it's funny because Ed's a great dude and it was fun hanging out with him. And he offered to make a whole bunch of intros, you know, for our show and stuff, and which was really nice of him. But he was like, "Look, you got to get better equipment." And I was like, "Ed, you know, come on, man. Like everyone starts somewhere." And he wasn't saying it like in a condescending way. He was just like, you know, if you really want to do a good job in the future, you know, it's not that expensive. Is basically what he was saying. He wasn't saying like you guys are a joke. He totally understood why we're doing it. But yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. So if you're looking to start a podcast, and I'm sure you can speak to this, like, you know, you definitely want to grind it out at the beginning, but if you can afford better equipment, it's only going to help. And especially if your goal is on good guests and big time guests, you know, people who get presented with a lot of opportunities, you know, they're going to be looking for professional quality. So it's important for sure. Yeah, for sure. Are you doing like the video interview with them, or was it just the podcast, or both? So we wanted to do video ones previously. So we've done 8 episodes. I would say the last few have been big. Like Dave Meltzer, he's a big person on Instagram. Like we had him on. He's a mentor of mine as well. And like we wanted to do video with Dave down at the Super Bowl, but like it ended up not working out because like the lighting and like the room that we were in didn't really work out. But Ed was the first one that we did video with. You know, I was supposed to record in person with Steve Weatherford as well and get video. That didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, I like the video aspect because I know for me personally with podcasts I listen to, sometimes I listen on YouTube, sometimes I listen on iTunes. It just kind of depends. Like sometimes having the visual aspect is cool. So if I'm going to grow it, you know, I kind of want to be able to meet both audiences. Yeah, definitely. And what are your future plans for this year and beyond, and your goals? So I'm working on a couple big things I can't really talk about publicly just because of legality stuff and, you know, just I want to play my cards close to the chest. But, yeah, man, I have a lot of big plans for this year. It's already been an amazing year. I mean, in 6 weeks, you know, I've met some people I've been trying to meet for years and, you know, might take me many more years to meet them, like, you know, Gary Vee, Dave Meltzer, Ed, Milet, you know, like it's just been an amazing 6 weeks or 7 weeks so far in 2019. So I'm super excited for, you know, the rest of the year and beyond. And, you know, I should be able to share a bunch of things I've been working on for a very long time, hopefully very soon. So, yeah, man, I wish I could give you more information, but a lot of it is just because of the nature of business, can't really talk about it too much. Exactly. You know me. Once it happens, I'll let the world know. But right now, I'm playing definitely the cards close to the chest, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say like makes you successful with your journey so far?
Well, first of all, I don't want to give the impression I am successful. Like, I face a lot of the same challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs face. You know, I do like to share a lot of stuff on social media. I try to keep it real. I try to talk about the challenges as well. But that being said, I've been fortunate to have a lot of good opportunities and a lot of good things happen for me. And, to be honest with you, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think the one thing is just network, man. Like, I think there's something when I talk to people, and I don't mean this in an arrogant or cocky way. Like, for some reason, people emotionally connect with what I am saying or doing or what I'm offering. And I don't know how to describe it, but it's all about getting in touch with the right people, having those people help you accelerate yourself to your goals. And that's what's happened to me this year, is especially being involved with something like the Players Impact, which is so synergistic with something like I'm doing with ScoutDay and the sports space. Like, it's just opened up so many doors so quickly. And all I'm doing is volunteering my time when I can for free. Yeah. And I get to go to all these events. I get to host this podcast. Like, honestly, I should be paying for the opportunity that I have, let alone just doing it for free and stuff like that, So I would say you gotta put yourself in a position to be successful by getting in touch with the right people. I do a lot of business development using Instagram DM and LinkedIn. Yeah. And I'm not afraid to do the outreach. I'm not afraid to put in the time and the effort to get in touch with these people who I'm trying to reach. And I've been fortunate to have some success doing that. So there's some practical advice for those of you who just kind of sit and listen to this and you're looking to make some moves. Grind through those DMs. You're most likely not going to get a reply, from a lot of the people you're trying to reach. But I've been fortunate to get, the 5 to 10 replies that have changed my life. And I've sent hundreds of messages, So it's like, when you say successful, if you look at the numbers, I wouldn't really call it successful. It's just I've had enough success where, it feels good to at least be making progress towards the bigger dream,
Yeah, for sure. I've been telling people, it's like, you just got to DM for business. Like, it's not just sliding into girls' DMs and stuff like that,
Right. 100%. No, you're exactly right. I've seen you put out that stuff. And, I think just to touch on this, I know, we're going a little bit long here, but I think a lot of people with all the social media stuff in 60 seconds or less, like, it takes a lot of time to build brand, to build community, to get in touch with these people via DM. And I think people try for 24, 48 hours or even like a few days or a week. Yeah. But then when they don't get the replies, they just forget about it and they just move on to the next thing. Like, everyone loves the instant gratification of doing this stuff. Yeah. And I think that's what separates me. And that's kind of the second part, is like, I'm in such a mindset of like, I know I'm going to make it, that like the struggle and like the rejection and the no replies and stuff like that, it genuinely doesn't get me down. And for some reason, even on the toughest days, I'm not saying I don't have days where I don't want to just give up and pack it in and, say I'm a failure and all this stuff. Like, I have those days, but I have the ability, for some reason, I would call it will, call it whatever, where I wake up the next day, and maybe I learned this in baseball, short memory and rebounding from adversity and stuff, but like, I know I'm going to push forward. I know even if I feel like quitting, I'm not going to. And I think by having kind of my spirit and my mind aligned in that way, it's allowed me to push through some of the challenges where maybe some other people would have stopped. And I think that's a huge difference as well, in terms of getting to the point that I have.
Yeah, definitely. I feel you on that. Just like, I have bad days. Sometimes you go to bed and you wake up and you're like, whatever, forget that day, and you go on to the next day. And I just want to tell the people how we connected, because it was through social media. And I remember I went on one of my friends, Eric Stone. I know you know him too. And I just followed. I was like literally just following all of his followers, and I followed you, and then that's how we connected, just via DM, and that's how we're here today, pretty much.
Right.
Which is crazy. So, and that was a couple of years ago now.
Right, 100%, man.
So let's just get to these last fun questions. So you ready for those?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. So top 5 favorite baseball players all time.
We got to go with Jeter, A-Rod, Ken Griffey Jr. Love Aaron Judge. I love what Aaron Judge is about. I know he's kind of newer to the game. Yeah. And, 5, and Mariano, man. I mean, I know that's very Yankee heavy, but, those are probably my top 5 that come to mind right away.
Can't go wrong with those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're not doing, entrepreneurial stuff, what do you like to do in your free time?
I love to work out. I consider myself an amateur boxer. I go to boxing class almost every day here in Boston. Honestly, it sounds lame, but I love the work, man. Like, I'd be pumped to have, like, meetings all day, and especially if they're productive ones. Like, dude, like, the progress of business, like, there's no better feeling than, like, having that good phone call or closing that deal or, you know, getting that investment from that investor you want. Like, that's what I love doing. But I'd say, like, fitness and golf. Like, I love to golf when the weather's nice, obviously. Yeah. And, I would say those are probably my two hobbies for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and tell the people where they can follow you at.
Yeah, for sure. Like I offered earlier, if anyone ever wants, you know, advice or just wants to talk, my Instagram is @AJ_Tuccio, and it's spelled AJTUCCIO, one word. You know, feel free to, as Paul said, slide in my DMs, and you know, I do read them, and I try to reply to everybody as quick as I can. So definitely hit me up there. And if you want to follow ScoutDay and be a part of that community, it's just ScoutDay app, one word, on Instagram too. Would really appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for having me.